In this video, Dr. Jordan Peterson explains what happened when we became self-conscious.
And the Lord God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and keep it. Okay, so that's an interesting idea, I think, because so what it's now what the story is proposing is that there's a universal habitation for mankind. And the universal habitation is the idea of the garden. Now, Eden means well-watered place, and paradise means, it's from paradisa, means a walled enclosure. So the original garden is a walled enclosure that's well watered. And then you think, well, what exactly is a garden? And it seems to me that a garden is a productive union of nature and culture. So it's another order and chaos union, right? So a perfect garden is beautiful because it's natural, but it's also beautiful because it's attended to and paid attention to. And a garden is also something that's productive, right? It's not just chaotic wilderness, it's a place where you can live. So the idea is that human beings have to live inside walled gardens. And so there's a physical element to that, which is just true. And then there's a metaphysical element to it, which is that the environment of a human being is the proper admixture of chaos and order. And it has to be bounded. So, and then there's a very interesting corollary to that, which I think is tremendously interesting, is that there's a snake in the garden. And that's an interesting thing, because part of that is the recognition that you can't have a place of bounded chaos and order that's productive without having something in it that's disruptive. There's no way of getting the disruptiveness out. And that's because, imagine, here's the problem. And this has been discussed intensely in Christian theology, because there's a relationship between the snake and Satan, which is something we'll talk about later. But if you're surrounded by infinite potential in some sense, and that's chaos, and you try to wall off part of it, you can't keep the chaos out. You can only keep it out partially in some sense, because it's going to come sneaking back in, because you can't erect a wall that's going to keep out all the potential from a designated safe place. And so if you have to live in a garden, you're going to encounter snakes. And not even God himself can keep the damn snakes out of the garden, because it's a inevitable consequence of walling off a small section from the whole. So let me see if I can give you an example. Well, I can think of a metaphysical example, which is, you're going to inhabit one of your conceptual structures and attempt to keep that matched with the world. That's like a walled space. You're saying, these are the relevant things, this is the place that I can inhabit. But the fact of the matter is that as you're walling off that little enclosure for you to inhabit, there's dynamism all around you. And the dynamism is going to affect the structure of this limited place that you're attempting to inhabit. And at some point, it's going to poke its head through. You just can't seal something off from everything. The thing is going to come back in. Now, one of the things that happens in the Genesis story is that the snake is actually something to which Adam and Eve cannot not attend. That's the other thing that's so interesting. So the snake pops up in what's essentially paradise, and human beings' attention is immediately drawn to it. And I would also say that's what human beings are like. If we've walled off something and attempted to make it perfect and secure, and something pops up inside that's unexpected and predatory and attractive, the first thing we're going to do is be automatically drawn to it. And then if we interact with it, what it's going to do is to increase our consciousness. And that is what happened as human beings evolved, because one of the things we know is that we co-evolved with snakes. We co-evolved with predatory snakes. And Lynn Isbell has demonstrated that the acuity of primate vision among a very large and diverse range of primates is correlated quite highly with the prevalence of predatory snakes in the environment. And so the Genesis story draws this tremendously complicated analogy, and one analogy is snakes give people vision, and the other analogy is the snake is actually representative of the chaos that surrounds every bounded order. And so it tells the story of psychological abstraction, so that would be consciousness versus the unknown, and it overlays that on primate snake. And it's because it's the same idea at two levels of abstraction. So you have the same reaction to unexpected things that occur in your pristine environment as your distant ancestors would have had to the appearance of a snake in a place that they regarded as secure, and used the same damn circuits. It's the same thing. And one of the major claims in the story of Genesis is no gardens without snakes. And so, the story is set up so that God tells men and women to ignore the damn snake, and not to pay any attention with it, not to interact with it, and also not to eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which we'll talk about later. But human beings don't do that. They interact with the snake and they become self-conscious, which is a catastrophe, and that's how it's shown in the story as well. So as soon as human beings become self-conscious, they get thrown out of paradise. So you can read it this way. We got so smart by paying attention to the damn snakes that we figured out we were mortal. They drove cortical evolution, especially the evolution of the visual system. Now, I'm not trying to reduce it to a unidimensional phenomena, but the point is, once you get cortically elaborated enough, at some point you're going to discover time, which we have discovered. And once you discover time, you're going to discover one of your boundaries, and one of your boundaries is a temporal boundary, and that means that you die. And that's sort of like the ultimate manifestation of self-consciousness. And then as soon as you know that you're going to die, well, you're not in paradise anymore. That's for sure. And then you have to start preparing for the future in a self-conscious manner. And one of the things that happens to Adam, once God catches him after he's become self-conscious, is God says to him straightforwardly, well, now you've done it. You've become self-conscious, and now all you're going to be able to do for the rest of history is work. You're going to be condemned to work. And you might say, well, what's the definition of work? And that's easy. It's the sacrifice of the present for the future. And you won't do that unless you're self-conscious, because why the hell would you prepare for the future unless you knew that it might consist of nothing but trouble? And, Genesis portrays that discovery as something that's absolutely fundamental to the ground of human existence.